I never thought I'd see him again after he chose his family's billion-dollar empire over me. But there I was, 10 years later, holding his and his new fiancée as very expensive wedding invitation in my shaking hands. Little did he know, the broke scholarship college girl he had so carelessly and so completely left behind had become something he never, ever could have expected. And I was about to make an entrance at his wedding that would change everything. Before I dive into this incredible story of love, of brutal betrayal, and of the ultimate and most satisfying revenge, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you do not want to miss a single, solitary twist in this story. And if you stick around until the very end, I promise you, the final twist will absolutely blow your mind. Now, let me tell you how I went from completely heartbroken to having the very last and most beautiful laugh. My name is Hadley, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the universe has a very funny and very beautiful way of balancing the scales. It all started 10 years ago when I was just another and very invisible scholarship kid at one of the most prestigious and most expensive universities in the entire country. I was studying economics. I was working too, grueling part-time jobs just to be able to afford ramen noodles. And I was trying my absolute best to just fit in among the other students. Students who spent more on their weekend outfits than I made in an entire month. And that is when I met Brandon. He had walked into my advanced economics class on the very first day, like he owned the entire place, which, knowing his family's immense and very public wealth, he practically did. While all the other girls in the class were swooning over his designer clothes and his expensive Swiss watch, I was just focused on taking my notes. But there was something different about him. Something in the way that he actually listened. During the class discussions, something in the way he would ask these thoughtful, probing questions that caught my attention. He wasn't just another bored rich boy who was just coasting his way through college on his daddy's money. Our first conversation happened after class, and he had approached me about forming a study group. I was hesitant at first because I knew exactly who he was. Everyone on that campus knew the name Brandon Crawford. His father owned one of the largest and most powerful investment firms on all of Wall Street, and his family had been featured on the covers of financial magazines, more times than I could even count. But when he had suggested that we meet at the library instead of at some expensive off-campus coffee shop, I knew that he was different. Those late-night study sessions, they turned into something beautiful. We would sit in the quiet, dusty back corner of the library, surrounded by tall stacks of textbooks and empty paper coffee cups, and we would talk for hours about everything from complex market theories to our own very different and very secret dreams for the future. He told me about the immense, crushing pressure he felt to one day take over his father's massive business, about how he sometimes felt as if his entire and very privileged life had already been planned out for him. And I, in turn, shared my own very different struggles. I told him about how I was so fiercely and so completely determined to break the long and very painful cycle of poverty in my own family, and to create something real and very meaningful of my own. For 8 beautiful and very magical months, we were inseparable. I should have known that it was all too good to be true. The first sign of a real and very serious trouble came when one of his arrogant and very entitled fraternity brothers saw us together at that little off-campus diner. Within a week, the whispers, the ugly and very classist whispers, were spreading all around the campus. Started to notice the stares, the way the conversations would stop dead, the very moment I walked into a room. But Brandon had assured me that it didn't matter what anyone else thought, said that we would face it all together. Everything changed on the day his parents found out. Brandon had come to my dorm room that evening, looking as if he had just seen a ghost. His hands were shaking as he told me about the long and very brutal conversation he had just had with his family. His mother had used words that I do not even want to repeat, questioning what I was really after and suggesting that I was only with him for his money. And his father, he had been much more direct. He had threatened to cut Brandon off completely and to remove him from his position as the heir to the family's massive business if he didn't come to his senses and end things with me. Immediately, I had watched the man I loved, the man I had thought was so strong, so confident, so different, completely and utterly crumble under the immense and very heavy weight of their disapproval. He kept saying that he just needed some time, that he needed to figure things out, that there had to be a way to make everyone happy. But deep down, I knew what was coming. You cannot fight a lifetime of a deeply ingrained conditioning and a powerful and very real privilege with just 8 short months of a pure and very beautiful love. I walked out of that library with my head held high, even though I was dying, completely and utterly on the inside. The months that followed were, without a doubt, the darkest and most difficult of my entire life. I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that began to worry my roommate. I graduated summa cum laude at the very top of my class, but Brandon wasn't there to see it. He had, as I had heard through the relentless and very painful campus grapevine, transferred to a different and much less academically rigorous university for his final semester, probably to avoid the sheer and very public awkwardness of having to see me around the campus. And I had also heard that he had already started dating someone new, like someone from his own very rarefied social circle, a beautiful, blonde girl whose very wealthy family owned a string of luxury hotels all across Europe. After graduation, I moved back to my small and now very suffocating hometown, and I worked 3 mind-numbing and very soul-crushing jobs while I applied to business school. Every single solitary rejection letter I received felt like another and very final confirmation that maybe, just maybe, I didn't belong in that world after all. But I refused, with every last and very stubborn ounce of my being, to give up. I spent my nights studying for the GMAT, and I wrote my application essays on my old beat-up laptop. A laptop that was literally held together with a roll of a cheap and very ugly duct tape. When I finally got the acceptance letter to a top and very prestigious MBA program with a full and very life-altering scholarship, I cried. For the very first time since Brandon had left me, business school was where everything, and I mean everything, changed. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. My professors, for the very first time in my entire academic life, recognized something in me that I was only just, and with a new and very fragile sense of a dawning and very beautiful hope beginning to see in myself. During my second year, I developed a new and very innovative idea for a mobile app. An app that would help small independent businesses to manage their own very complex finances more efficiently. It had started out as just a simple class project, but my favorite professor, a woman who had become my own personal mentor, had encouraged me to enter it in the university's annual and very prestigious business plan competition. I will never, ever forget the night that I won that competition. Standing on that grand and very intimidating stage, holding a check for $50,000, I felt something that I had never, ever experienced before in my entire life. It's true and very unshakable confidence. This wasn't about proving Brandon wrong anymore. This was about proving myself right. I used that prize money to turn my simple class project into a real and very powerful business, working out of my tiny and very cramped apartment, living on a diet of an instant and very cheap coffee and a pure, unadulterated determination. The first year was brutal. I was coding for 18 hours a day. I was reaching out to potential customers, and I was learning every single solitary aspect of running a business through a long and very painful series of a trial and error. But slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, things started to click. My app, it filled a real and very necessary need in the market. And the word, the powerful and very beautiful word, began to spread. I landed my first major client, and then my second, and then my 10th. By the end of my second year in business, I was making more money than I had ever, in my wildest, most ambitious dreams, ever imagined. The real breakthrough came when a major and very powerful venture capital firm reached out to me. They had been watching my company's quiet and very steady growth, and they wanted to invest. The meeting was intimidating. I walked into a conference room that was filled with men in expensive and very well-tailored suits. Men who looked as if they could buy and sell me without even thinking twice. But when I started to talk about my vision, something magical and very powerful happened. They weren't seeing a young and very out-of-place black woman from a poor and very insignificant background anymore. They were seeing a CEO with a billion-dollar idea. That one, single investment, allowed me to scale my business beyond anything I had ever dreamed of. I hired a team of the most brilliant and most innovative developers in the entire country. I opened new and very beautiful offices in 3 major cities. And I started to acquire some of the smaller and very promising companies that complemented my own very powerful technology. The very same business magazines that had once featured Brandon's powerful and very famous family now began to feature me. Forbes called me the new tech prodigy who is completely revolutionizing the world of small business finance. And Inc. magazine named me as one of their 30 under 32 watch. But the real and most profound transformation wasn't financial. It was internal. I started to work with a personal stylist, not because I was trying to impress anyone, but because I wanted my own outside to finally and completely reflect the new and very powerful confidence that I now felt on the inside. I learned how to carry myself differently. I learned how to speak with a new and very real authority. And I learned how to command the respect in any and every room that I entered. The scared and very insecure little college girl who had so foolishly and so completely let a rich and very weak, a boy's powerful and very cruel family make her feel so small, so insignificant, was gone, and she was gone forever. 5 years after I had first started my company, we went public. The IPO was oversubscribed by 400%. And overnight, I became one of the youngest and one of the very few black female billionaires in the entire country. I remember sitting in my new and very beautiful corner office on the 40th floor of a magnificent Manhattan skyscraper, looking out at the city that had once seemed so impossible to conquer and feeling a deep and very profound sense of a quiet, very beautiful satisfaction. Not because I had proven Brandon wrong, but because I had finally and completely proven myself right. I used my new and very immense wealth to start a foundation that provided scholarships and mentorships to other young and very brilliant people from underserved communities. I bought my parents their dream house. And I made sure that my little sister could go to any college in the entire world that she wanted to without ever having to worry about the money. I dated occasionally, but I was selective. I had learned that I was complete all on my own, and that anyone who wanted to be a part of my new and very beautiful life had to add a real and very genuine value, not take it away. And that is when the wedding invitation arrived. I stared at that invitation for a long, long time, the memories, both the beautiful and the painful, flooding back like a movie I hadn't watched in years. My first, very human instinct was to just throw it in the trash and forget that it had ever arrived. But something deep and profound stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity, a simple human desire to know who Brandon had become. Or maybe, just maybe it was the desire for a closure that I didn't even know I still needed. I did a quick and very discreet internet search, and I found out that Caroline Whitmore, his new fiancée, was the beautiful blonde daughter of one of his father's biggest and most powerful business partners. The marriage, it was clear, was a strategic one designed to merge to vast and very powerful family empires and to create an even larger and even more powerful financial dynasty. It was exactly what I had predicted all those long and very painful years ago. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was an opportunity. Not for a petty and very simple revenge, exactly, but for something so much more powerful. It was the chance to show up as the woman I had so completely and so beautifully become, and to let that, and that alone, speak for itself. I called my assistant and told her to RSVP yes for 2. And then I called my new and very handsome and very kind friend Marcus, a successful tech entrepreneur I had been casually and very happily dating. And I asked him if he would like to be my +1 to what was promising to be the single, most important social event of the entire season. Choosing what to wear became a strategic and very satisfying decision. I worked with my stylist to select a custom-made gown that was elegant, but was also unmistakably and very unapologetically powerful. It was a deep emerald green silk, a color that I knew would complement my own skin tone perfectly, with clean, simple lines that spoke of my success without being flashy, and I paired it with a set of simple but very large and very real diamond earrings, pieces from my own personal collection, pieces I had bought for myself. To celebrate my own major business milestones, the woman who was looking back at me in the mirror was someone that Brandon Crawford had never, ever met. And I couldn't wait for him to see what he had missed. The day of the wedding, I arranged for a private car service to pick up Marcus and me. As we drove through the manicured and very exclusive grounds of the Hamptons estate, I felt surprisingly and very beautifully calm. This was not about a confrontation, and it was not about drama. So it was about showing up as my own authentic self and letting that and that alone be enough. The ceremony was everything you would expect from old money. It was tasteful, it was traditional, and it was very, very expensive. I chose seats toward the back, not because I was hiding, but because I wanted to observe. I watched as Brandon stood at the altar in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, looking every single solitary inch the successful and very obedient heir he had been so carefully and so ruthlessly groomed to be. And when his new bride, Carolyn, walked down the aisle, she was beautiful in that classic cold and very untouchable way that only a great deal of a very old money can buy. But there was something in Brandon's posture, a stiffness, a lack of a real, genuine joy, that suggested that this was a duty rather than a celebration. The real moment came during the reception's cocktail hour. I was standing with Marcus near the bar, engaged in a very real and very interesting conversation with a group of other young entrepreneurs I had met in the business world. When I felt his eyes on me, I turned just slightly, and I saw Brandon's father across the room. The recognition in his eyes was immediate, and it was very, very uncomfortable. He whispered something to his wife, Patricia, and I watched as her own perfectly composed face changed as she finally, and with a dawning and very real horror, realized who I was. Word spread quickly through the crowd then. I could feel the energy of the entire room shift as people began to put together who I was and what my very unexpected and very powerful presence at this particular wedding meant. Some of the guests looked curious. Others, I could see, were impressed. And a few, the older, more traditional ones, seemed almost scandalized that the woman their golden boy had so carelessly, so completely rejected, was now, by all accounts, even more successful than he was. Brandon found me during the cocktail hour, approaching while Marcus was at the bar, getting us another, and very much needed, drink. 10 years had been kind to him, physically. Oh. But there was something different in his eyes. Where there had once been an easy, boyish confidence, there now seemed to be a deep and very heavy. Wait, I felt a stab of something then. Not quite. Pain, but not a complete and very satisfying indifference either. There was a small and very human part of me that had waited 10 long and very lonely years to hear those exact words. But the woman I had so completely and so beautifully become, she knew better than to let the old and very painful wounds of the past dictate her new and very powerful choices. And before he could respond, I delivered the final and most beautiful news of all. Actually, I said, there is something else that you should know. Next month, my company is finalizing the acquisition of the Crawford Industries commercial lending division. Apparently, I added, my own voice a cool and very professional sound, your own family's business has been struggling with the new and very changing financial landscape. My board of directors thought that it would be a very good and very strategic purchase. I watched his handsome and now very pale face change as the full and very devastating implications of what I had just said finally, and with a great and very final certainty, sank in. So, in a way, I said, you were right all those years ago. You did choose money over love. The irony is that now I have both, the money and a real and very true love. A love for myself and for my own, very powerful purpose. As I walked back into the reception, I felt a sense of completion that I hadn't expected. This wasn't about winning or losing anymore. This was about recognizing that sometimes the universe guides you exactly where you need to go, even when the journey is painful. Brandon had chosen security over love, tradition over change, and his family's approval over his own heart. Choices had consequences, but they weren't my consequences to bear anymore. I found Marcus at our table and suggested we make our exit. As we walked to our car, I felt lighter than I had in years. The scared college girl who had left that library, heartbroken, was finally, truly gone. 3 months later, when the acquisition of Crawford Industries' lending division was finalized, I made sure to handle it professionally and fairly. I didn't gloat or try to make it personal. Business was business, and I'd learned to separate my emotions from my decisions. Brandon's family received fair market value for their assets, and their employees were retained with better benefits packages than they'd had before. I never saw Brandon again after his wedding, though I heard through business circles that his marriage was exactly what everyone expected it to be: successful on paper, but lacking in warmth. My own life continued to flourish. Marcus and I eventually became serious, building a relationship based on mutual respect and shared values rather than desperate need or social pressure. Looking back now, I can see how every moment of pain, every rejection, every obstacle was preparing me for the success I eventually found. Brandon's choice to prioritize his family's expectations over our relationship wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a much better one, and that's how I learned that sometimes the very best revenge is simply and beautifully becoming the very best version of yourself. If this story has inspired you to never, ever settle for less than you so richly and so completely deserve, smash that like button and share this story with someone who needs to hear this powerful and very beautiful message. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of a quiet and very real triumph and a very beautiful transformation. And remember, when someone shows you who they really are, you believe them the very first time.